Okay guys, so I said I wouldn't be doing this video, and I'm sorry for the vertical format. It just works a lot better later on this video and you'll see why. But basically, based off the clickbait thumbnail, your pelvic floor and your hip tightness and your tight ass, whatever I put, is going to be the reason why your erection quality sucks. So the main idea behind that is in our taint, we have two muscles called the bulbous spongiosum and ischiocavernous muscle. These muscles are responsible for one, urination and ejaculation, and the other, the ischiocavernous muscle, is going to be mainly in charge of the erection. They flex and contract depending on the needs, and if they can't flex properly or they can't relax properly, you know, there's two different issues there, they will not be able to be at their peak, and on top of that, it can lead to premature ejaculation. So if you have any kind of hip tightness whatsoever, that could potentially lead to erection quality and premature ejaculation. So it is a huge issue that we should probably be talking about here on this channel. That being said, I made a video showing you how fucking complex all the muscle relationships to the pelvis and hip are. So it's going to take me a bit to figure out like actual treatment plans for everyone that has potential pelvic floor issues. So what I'm showing you today is something that I've been playing around with for the past couple months that has really helped with a lot of like the external and hip flexors. So that'd be the abductors and hip flexors. Because as a white dude, they just end up being tight, I think, as a genetic thing. But if you couldn't tell, that was a joke. But the main idea is the looser and more flexible our hips are, the less pressure we can have on our pelvic floor. Therefore, we can have our best erections possible without being limited by having literally a hand on the trigger, causing premature ejaculation. So I'm going to walk through what I've been doing for the past 3 months to first help keep my hip mobility, something I've been absolutely nuts about since I left high school. If your hips are tight, you're going to have bad walking patterns, which are going to lead to nagging injuries and potentially injuries while lifting. So healthy hips, one of the most important things you can have as a sexually active young man or old man. Actually, very much so for an old man, since most of you guys probably don't stretch enough as it is. You have 20 years of stiffness to work out. Meanwhile, someone who's only 23 might only have 5 years of stiffness, right? So I think I just called 40-year-olds old. Sorry, but you get the point. This is going to help you guys get started on fixing your shit in your hips and pelvis. And as I learn more, I will gladly share it with you, but we got to start somewhere. That being said, I really like this routine. It has honestly made me about an inch taller, because of what a lot of this is related to is your lumbar. So if you sit all day like I do, editing videos, touching myself, whatever, that can actually lead to your lumbar slowly compress, and this is going to help release the shit out of it. Like, I will go from like borderline 6 foot to like 6'1", 6'1.5" just with doing these exercises. So if you felt like you're shrinking, you're probably not wrong. This will help fix that as well as doing some dead hangs that are not covered in this video. So I'm going to edit this all together because I already did all the stretching, and then I'll see you at the end of the video. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that this is going to be case by case specific. So while this is a good starting point, I want you to really pay attention to your trouble areas. So don't have anything potentially distracting, no TikTok, no Facebook. I don't know what age demographic mainly watches my channel as my monitor turns off in the background. But point being, I want you to focus intently on the muscles that we're stretching. This is going to be like a meditative practice where you try to understand your body. So again, I'll bring this up a lot in the video, but my right leg is actually a little bit shorter, probably because it's deeper into the hip socket than my left. So my left has great mobility, but since I have a deeper femur in my pelvis, I try to lean a bit to the right more to compensate for the lack of mobility. So if you see yourself leaning a bit, so like do this in front of a mirror, really good idea actually. That's going to be probably because you have some mobility issue on that one side. Then wherever you're tight, take note, and then probably do those stretches more often. So like I'll do this entire thing 2 to 3 times a week. But like, let's say I had extremely tight hip abductors. You'll probably want to stretch those bad boys 2 to 3 times a day so you can get out of that bad movement pattern. Again, we'll touch a lot more on what you need to do in your specific situation as I learn more. You guys know I'm really bad at YouTube by now. So if you could do me a solid, like and subscribe. Really helps me out. It really points me in the right direction for what I need to focus on. So if I get a lot more subscribers from one video, guess what? I'm going to focus on that, especially if it has a lot more likes. So please like and subscribe if you like this video. Also, I sell shit at peakmyphysique.com, mainly penis enlargement stuff. Yes, that is possible if you're coming from a different section of the internet than I normally frequent. Additionally, Leviathan Wellness has stuff that will help with erection quality, particularly Fortitude. Fucking fantastic. I'm completely biased here because I sell that shit, but it's one of the best things I've personally taken for erection quality. It has been formulated by a doctor. Really worth your time if you are interested in more of the supplemental ways that we can help erection quality. That being said, your best bet for erection quality is going to always be increasing cardiovascular health and opening up that hip girdle. But if you're looking for a boost on top of that, check out Fortitude at leviathansubs.com. All right, so I don't have a good place to film this other down here. You do not need a squat rack. All you need is some kind of frame to push against, whether it be a door frame, archway, whatever. Even a good wall would work if you can just get your hands around it. So, actually just a wall would work. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Anyway, what we're trying to do is stretch our I guess our gluteus medius. What we're trying to do, stretch our oblique, stretch our hip abductor, and then stretch our gluteus medius at the same time. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna push against this frame and twist at the same time. So this is starting position. Notice how my torso is down towards the floor. We're gonna open up to the ceiling and push out a bit with our top arm. Hold, deep breaths, come back and repeat. Most of these stretches should take 5 to 15 seconds. The more often you do the stretch, the more your tissue elongates. So meaning the more often you pulse the stretch, the more stretch you get. Now, same idea, other side, and just so you can see it from the back, push, push. So as you progress in the flexibility and the tissue lightens up, move your hands down so that way you're more extension on the stretch side. Again, make sure that you have the hip pointing up towards the ceiling. Obviously, the wider the space you have to work, the better, because that way you can get deeper and deeper into the stretch. Another thing you can try to do is bring your feet closer to the bar you're pushing again. So the closer you get your feet, the more of an oblique stretch you get, and the farther out you get, the more gluteus medius stretch you get. So depending on what you feel like needs more work, you can modify it as you need. I'm gonna just kneel for now to make it a bit easier. We are going to be doing some basic mobility testing real quick just to show you what we're really looking for. So we're just gonna do full ROM squat, body weight. Now, most of you are gonna have issues with how far your ankle can go past your toes, because back in the 80s, they thought this would cause a lot of stress, but like this is a very natural movement. One of the only ways you can actually get your weight over the rest of your leg when you squat. So depending on the sport, obviously, this is a very safe movement. So that's something we're gonna test here, because if there's any limited mobility here, it transfers up the hip in some capacity. So we'll start with that, and then another thing we need to look for is our lower back. Now, most of us probably have an office job these days. Also, if you do like construction, manual labor, anything that really causes you to be hunched over or compressing your spine, that's going to put a lot of load on your lumbar and probably make it really tight or compressed. So we're going to really work on that too in this scenario. Again, this is all the stuff that I found a lot of success with when it comes to mobility, hip health, and in this case, pelvic floor health. So first movement, again, deep squat. Then the other movement is going to be basically an alternating leg squat. Now, I'm hoping I have enough room here to show it off, but basically feet a little bit wider than shoulder width. We're gonna go down to one side. Oh, see, I didn't have enough room. And then the idea here is to shift your weight over without having to adjust your feet. Now, I have a desk right here, so I can't really do it that well, but the goal here is to see what cracks. Eventually, we want to get our ankle to the bottom, like so, and then come back up and over. See, I'm loosened up a bit, so it's much easier. But that's a bit more intermediate to advanced stuff. You don't need to be able to do that, but it's a good test to see, one, where your leg strength is, and two, where the issues are in your posterior chain to be able to do something like that, right? Let's start with the deep squat. Now, what we're looking for is being able to get our feet over our toes without our ankles coming off the ground. We do need to adjust our feet a bit, that's fine. Now, they should point out. Good squat position, so always gonna have your feet out about 15 to 30 degrees, depending on how wide you are. This allows your femur to move easier in your pelvis. Now, I have a natural shift to my right side because my right leg is jammed higher into my pelvis. So, a lot of my limited mobility comes from my right side, and there could be a lot of reasons for it, but basically, I played basketball for over a decade through, childhood and such. This is your planting foot and your driving foot. It got jammed up into my hip socket, and it takes a lot of work for me to get it back to normal. But for you guys, what I want you to look for is any issues here. This is going to be very uncomfortable between here and here if you don't have good ankle mobility. And then some of you guys are going to be able to squat all the way down, keep your back completely flat, but like if you're like me, high back puller, I guess lower back puller is a good way to put it, you're gonna get some rounding. So to fix the rounding, you actually have to lean back more, and up, and it's a bit harder depending on how you're built. I have a lot of lower back tightness. So this is called hip dip in the power rack. This is called hip dip in the powerlifting world. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be a sign of poor biomechanics elsewhere. But going this deep, most of you guys will have to round your back a little bit. Now, if you find yourself falling forward, more than likely it's because you can't shift your weight to in front of you. So, you can start by getting something to brace with for balance. I have my chair right here. I'll pull it up so you can see it a bit. Go down, and then what you want to do is make sure you use the least amount of chair possible as you work your way back. That's going to be a good way to test mobility. So, general rule, anywhere we have tightness when we're in a full squat is where we're limiting in mobility. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that that specific area is where we're limited, but it's a very good starting point. So, for me, I have a bit of tension here and a tension actually up in my upper back. That's a bit out of the scope of this video, but it's something I'm going to work on my own. Now for this kind of sucks. You will feel most of the tension right through here and right through here, and additionally in your ankles. Again, any deep squat, you need to be able to get your knees over your toes to get good positioning and weight balance. So go pretty wide, go down, go down, go down. Again, I didn't go wide enough. And you see how my ankle is just lifting off the floor. That's fine just to start. But what we're trying to do is see where any potential issue is when we do this. At least what I do. This is not necessarily a treatment plan, but it is a good starting point for at least this video series. So I like to shift between legs. It's a bit of a workout, to be honest, but it also helps open up the hip flexors a bit. Now, you don't have to do either of those for the actual stretching part, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to see what the issues are, right? So I'm going to do a bit of an advanced quadriceps stretch and tibialis stretch. If you can't do this stretch, that's fine. I'll show you how to do the more basic versions of it here in a second. But this is called the hero pose. So we're going to get down on both knees. Okay? Down on both knees, and then we just lean back, sit on our ankles. If you probably can't tell, but my knees pop every time I do this because we're putting so much pressure on this. Now, if we lean back more and more, we're going to put more pressure on the tibialis and more pressure on the quads. We can switch our knees a bit to get a little more flexion up here. But like, my quads are pretty flexible. I barely feel it here. I feel a shit ton right here in my ankle joint. So if you want to work on this, you slowly walk back using your arms to support your weight. Try to keep your torso with good posture. Now, show it from this angle, same idea. We're gonna go down and just sit back on our toes. Again, the farther we lean back, the better for the stretch. Now, obviously, if you never stretched like that before, it's gonna be hell. So, alternative is a simple quadricep stretch. There's two ways you can do it. One, you can pull your quad up to your opposite glute. So, like so, right? Or you can just pull it straight back. It is gonna work the quadricep head a little bit different depending on which one you're using, right? Then for tibialis, all you're gonna do, put your foot behind you, point your toes, lean back, lean back, lean back until you feel a good stretch. And other foot. This is really good for your toe flexibility too. Lean back, lean back, lean back. Okay, so that's the idea. If you can't do the hero pose, tibialis stretch, quadricep stretch. Now, more simple thing coming up is just a typical hamstring toe touch. Now, a lot of you guys limit yourself in hamstring flexibility. One, because we're taught in T-ball. Excuse me, I'm on the floor and it's a bit dusty in here. Now, some of us limit ourselves with T-ball stretching, right? So they teach you keep your back straight, try to keep your legs straight, and go, go, go. No, that's not what we're trying to do. So this is gonna work your lower back a bit, but there's gonna be another variant of the stretch that's better for this. But what we're really trying to do is get our hamstrings to feel most of the stretch. So we need to relax our diaphragm, let all the air out. Really nice relaxed breaths. And then we start rolling over in the lumbar. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Notice how my legs aren't straight. Then we hook our hands under. All right, we're gonna bend down a bit, and then we're gonna lean up. I guess push up. So we're gonna bend down and then push up. Hold, keep your back relatively neutral. A little bit of flexion is fine. We do not want extension in this case. Relax, go. And like if you're not getting a good stretch, farther back on your feet to hold you in deeper, go. Or I guess release, then go. There we go. Now, I'm gonna show you it from my side, or from the back. But again, we are not worried about keeping our legs straight. We're worried about feeling the stretch. That is the most important part. So we're gonna go down, breathe out first to make sure we don't have any weird pressure in our diaphragm or abdomen. Grab our toes, pull back, pull back, pull. Up. Now, same idea. We just do wider set. Once we get down to one side, we'll actually start getting a bit more of a lumbar stretch on that side and a bit of a gluteal stretch as well. So notice how I have my notice how I have my toes pointed out. I'll bring my feet a little closer so you can see them. Down. Again, from the side, my legs are not trying to be straight. That is not the point of this. Now, another thing to keep an eye out for, I'll also do it on this side to even myself out. This is one stretch. Bring your torso all the way over to this leg, enhances the stretch. So depending on what you're comfortable with, try to get your torso in line with your foot as you do these stretches. The wider you go, the more crazy it will be because you have to twist, and that's going to be stretching the oblique at the same time. Okay, real simple. A lot of T-ball stretch. Now, another thing you can do for hamstrings, again, this is going to be all dependent, don't want to get demonetized here, guys, but this is all going to be a bit dependent on what you need specifically. Hamstrings are going to be pretty tight in general, but they're pretty easy to fix. So, we did this position, or we did shoulder width, we did slightly beyond shoulder width. Now what we can actually do is put our feet crossed, and that's gonna get your glute more. Now, you don't even have to try to touch your toes. What we do is we just push back with our glutes, and we can actually get a pretty good glute stretch with this one. So let me turn to the side so you can see what I'm doing. Push back, push back, push back, push back. And it's not really so much trying to grab as far as you can, but get the glute to stretch more than anything else. Now, it's gonna be whatever foot is behind getting the stretch. See, we'll go down as far as we can while pushing back. It's back and down, not just down for that one. All right, now onto the floor. Not gonna lie, this one sucks the most for me in particular. Regular toe touches, all right? I've hated these since elementary school because I had a very stiff lower back and I could not get farther than this, and I got like a -4 on the stretch test. So this is really good for the lower back. So the cue actually is going to be rounding your lower back. Honestly, if you do this right, you won't even need to put your hands on your feet, and you can just push, relax, push, and relax. But the problem is there's so much tension in your lower back normally, is that you're going to need something to actually pull you forward. So go out a little bit with your toes just to get started. Walk forward. Again, relaxing. The more you can get your diaphragm to relax, the better. So that way there's more points of flexion. And just breathe. Now, what we can do is walk our fingers back, walk our fingers forward, walk our fingers back, and then forward. And then every time you do that, you should notice it's a little bit easier to stretch. So that's going to be a good progression protocol. If you're an absolute nutcase, get a resistance band, hook it up in front of you, and then pull yourself into position. Obviously, go as far as you comfortably can, but that's going to really get your lower back to allow you to lay flat like that. Wider you go, the more deep you can get. My goal is honestly to be able to do a full split and then lay down. So I got to twist because I don't have much room. But this will now start stretching here more. So what I really think is important is that you hit the muscles from every angle that they're responsible for. So obviously the lower back's going to be involved here, but then you get your hip flexors involved here, as well as the inside of the hamstring. Now, usually I find it easier to start middle, go wide, then come narrow to actually stretch my lower back and glutes. Yeah, this is the worst stretch for me. So like if I'm struggling, that's why. Now, let me see if I can get this all. Yeah, it shouldn't be bad. All right. So again, it's all about the lower back here, not so much the hamstrings. We already stretched that. So farther we can get this, the better. So we actually want to suck in a bit so that way our little love handle here does not get in the way, and you can keep stretching and going. Some people like to keep their feet tight like this. This is going to make it more of a hamstring stretch and a quad or a calf stretch, not necessarily what we're going for the lower back. So that's that one. That's going to be a lot of the hamstring. Now, just because we're down here and it's easy, we're going to do some butterflies. So there's a few ways you can do these as I try to get centered with the camera. So feet as wide as possible. The goal actually is to either A, get your knees as close to the floor as possible, or B, get your chest as close to your toes as possible. So I prefer to pull myself in because that puts the most pressure on my hip flexors. Some people like to do this. It's not really worth it. What we're working on here is getting the hip flexors to open. So deep breaths. Now, an important cue for while we do like these stretches, the ones that are directly related to the hip and glutes, is focusing on opening up the pelvic floor. That's going to be the main point of this video series, is fixing pelvic floor health, having great erection quality, and fixing any like chronic pelvic floor issues. So I want you to imagine there's a balloon in your taint, okay? And as we breathe, every breath, we blow out that balloon. Lean forward a bit more. Now that's just one relatively easy stretch for the hip flexors. Well, we're going to get into the glutes, and I should probably think of a different camera angle for this. But what we're going to be doing is knee to chest and then variant off of that. So what we're looking to do is basically bring your knee to your chest. That's one part of the stretch. And then we open up, pulling it to the shoulder instead. So up and over. This is going to get a lot more hip flexor than glute, but I feel like a lot of guys are going to need to work on the hip flexors more than their glutes if I'm being 100% honest. So up and over. Same idea. Up and over. Now, I am doing these stretches until I don't really feel a stretch. So that could be anywhere from 30 seconds to 3 minutes. Your mileage will vary. Again, once you do the stretch, you know if you need to work on it or not, based off of how intense it really is. Just making sure I still got my lapel. Okay. Now, another variant that you can do is we're going to be doing another similar stretch with it, but so we brought our leg up and over, right? Now we can actually twist our knee and get a bit of the piriformis right here. I guess it'd be more like right here with this. This is going to be a little bit more of a beginner version of it. But again, I feel a lot of this in my hip flexors right now. So easy, intermediate, and then a bit more advanced. If we're trying to differentiate between lumbar muscle and glute muscle, it's going to come down to how much we curve our back. So if we let our hips come up all the way with this, guess where the stretch is going to be? It's going to be more up here, because once we do full motion, the hips aren't going to feel any of the stretch because they are actually rotated completely up. But our lower back is actually going to feel most of this tension. So depending on what you need will determine on what position you need to have your pelvis in. And again, this is a stretch on its own. And if you do that breathing exercise like this, it's kind of like a birthing exercise, if I'm being completely honest. You can get a lot of pelvic floor release just by doing that. Piriformis stretch, since I brought that up real quick. Cross your leg, bring it up to your knee, and then we're going to lay back. Obviously, order doesn't really matter for that part, but pull your knee to your chest. Deep breaths. This is the side that you'll be feeling. Wait. This is the side you should be feeling the stretch. You might feel some stretch here if you have some gluteal tightness, but for the most part, the gluteus medius, gluteus maximus, and piriformis muscle on the leg that's up, so will have the stretch. And again, depending on how much you let your pelvis roll up, will change how much is stretched. I like to keep my head back for balance more than anything else, but like if you lean forward, it won't really matter. And let me flip around so you can see what I'm talking about. So again, with this, what we're looking for is mostly neutral pelvis, but that's going to depend on your head position, because that's going to actually act like a counterbalance. So if your head's back, your glutes and pelvis might lift a bit more than if it was completely up, but when it's up, your entire back is rounded, so you might be stretching your lower back more. It's really going to depend on your own biomechanics there. All right, now we're getting into a bit more pelvic floor specific stretching, so I'm going to look a little funny, and this is why I do. Actually, I do this at the gym too, so it doesn't really matter. If the less shame you have involving pelvic floor stuff, the better you'll be at them. So this is going to be called the prayer pose. My God, I did this every time. This is called the prayer pose. So feet are behind you. You're on your knees. You should have them shoulder width apart, but you can also bring them together. We're going to start with shoulder width apart. I'm going to come over this way just so I have more room to work. Hands on the ground, all fours. Lean back, lean back, lean back. Push a bit with your arms into the position. Now, if you're a big rib cage man like myself, a little bit wider allows for a bit more of a stretch. That's a lot better. Now, you can try to flex your butt up a bit, and that's going to actually really open up the pelvic floor in my experience. You can also try to flex your back doing this. If you alternate between this and this, you can get some pretty good release of the pelvic floor. Now, it needs to be controlled, and some of you just might have a better response by sitting like this, imagining the air balloon in your taint, expanding and retracting with each breath. Now, what I was talking about was this, is we can do, and then try to bring up a bit. It's very subtle. So, let me try to, I'm like rolling up onto my head a bit is really what I'm doing. And then we can push back down farther and farther, and really get the hip flexors. Okay. Now, an even more difficult variant of that is something called frog pose. So we had our feet out coming into us, right, or slightly behind us. Now we want our ankles on the floor, all right? And then we really don't have to lean that far back once we're in this position because it puts so much tension on the groin. Again, same idea, up, back, if you really want to try to play around with your pelvic tilt and pelvic floor. But most of you guys will have the best results just breathing. I like to pulse just a tad to allow a deeper stretch. Okay. Another fun one coming up is going to be, I can't remember the name, but it's basically a lunge stretch. So forward, forward. Keep your torso in front of your legs. Actually, hold on. So, I'm going to start here, bring one leg forward into a lunge position. We want to keep our torso in line with our knee, but we want to keep our torso tall. So, lean forward, lean forward. If you need a bit more room to go forward, that's fine, just move your foot forward. Up, up, and we're going to be feeling it here and here. And I did this yesterday and I got a huge pop from my bad side. So that'd be this side. We'll see if we get the same thing here. This is a bit of a balance thing too. So if you're having issues with balance, it's fine to come forward. But again, progression, work up, and then you can even do this if you're nuts. But we're here for practicality, not for cool factor. Okay, and then if you want to do the antithesis, it's going to be hero pose, one leg. Come back up, forward as far as you can go, comfortably. Same idea. This leg's going to be rough for me. Now notice how I like have a natural lean outwards. We're going to try to bring that in. Oh yeah, mind the dog here. Again, I really want to push out to make room for my leg. That's part of the issue for me, is that my right leg is so deep into my pelvis that it doesn't like to be straight out, and I have issues squatting because of it. So my main focus is driving my leg straight forward, getting my weight on top of it. Relax. Oh, I just felt that knee pop. Ugh, okay. This is going to be one of the more advanced stretches. Just letting you know now. See, I want to go out as much as I can, but we're not trying to. Okay. Whew. right now I'm just running through it. I would spend a little more time in that one because that's my trouble position, right? So your legs should be pretty cooked by now. Another really good finisher for me specifically, since we got all the other muscles loosened up, we can actually like realign our back on our own a bit. So we're gonna lay flat on the ground. Okay, I'm gonna take one leg, bring it over the other. If you had a lot of room, and I already cracked my back, you want to have your leg sticking out a bit. This arm's a counterbalance, so that way you don't just flop over. And you hold it, and if we can get that leg straight, we can get a lot more stretch right here and into the hamstring. The higher you bring the knee, the better for stretching the glute. Same idea. Now, since we cracked, might be a good idea to do the stretch twice. So, I have a bit more room to come this way. And fish tank just turned on, so just ignore that. But you get the idea. Again, bringing the leg as high as possible is going to be best. Arm behind you is going to lead to the best stretch, at least in my experience. Finish off. And this is going to be a little bit if you really want to do this. This half lotus, that's like a very common yoga thing. This is going to prep you to be able to do a half lotus. So what I've been doing is I've been trying to start with a half lotus. So it's basically when you have one foot flat across your other leg. Full lotus is when you're able to flip both up over your leg. So we start like this. Notice how this foot's already flat. Most of you guys are going to be able to get here, no problem. Problem is when you try to get into the deeper position. So what you do is you just rock a bit on the one side that's giving you the most issues. And you should feel the stretch actually opposite of the leg you're putting pressure on. Since we're leaning, that's going to put all that stretch mainly on that abductor there. So I'll flip to the side so you can see what I'm talking about. Just got to remember how I have my feet set up. Up, over. Okay. And since I already did it a couple times, I'm already deeper into that position. So I like rocking because, again, every 15 to 45 second hold in this stretch is usually optimal for muscle elongation. But that takes a lot of time. So if it's 5 seconds or so, no big deal. Now, that was my bad leg that had the issues. So I just wanted to bring up this point. I think I'm setting up the wrong way again. Yeah. You're gonna have legs or positions, depending like this position in particular, where you can do pretty much that movement, no issue. And if you go a little bit wider, you can actually get into position pretty easily. Boom, half lotus, at least a shitty one. But like if I try to do it the other way, I should have some significant issues getting to it. See, like I have to put a lot more force to actually get in that position, and it's not at the same location. You can tell by the shadow. So for me, I have to worry about my right leg more than anything else. And that's going to be my case. For you guys, I want you to really pay attention to where the pain is coming from. So one last stretch, and this one's going to be more optional than anything. But like if you're a bodybuilder and do a lot of ab exercises, this is going to really help open up your rib cage and make you just look bigger. I guess there's a few other exercises we can talk about. That'll be for another video. But we're going to do a Cobra stretch. This is going to stretch out the abs. There's a few ways you can do it. I guess I'll stay back here. Feet flat, feet up, and then that's really it. The farther you bring your hands to your pelvis, the better. So obviously beginner would start here, and we just flip our head back. But as we progress, bring our hands closer, because then it forces an even deeper extension of the abdomen. Now, I have my head back because it forces my rib cage to be up. And that's going to allow for a bit of a deeper stretch. Now, I adjusted my knees a bit so that way my inner thighs are touching the floor now. That's going to change the stretch a bit and make it a bit more lower abs, at least for me. So if you adjust on your knees, it's going to be a bit more center and upper abs. Bring your knees to the side. It's going to be more lower ab into the hip flexors. I might just have really tight hip flexors. And then if you're crazy, you can do scorpions. But that's going to be a bit more tension than you really need for this. So hopefully my erotic stretching did not get you guys in trouble at work. Okay, so we got all the stretches done. Again, I meant to make sure that you guys know this is going to be case by case specific on what you need to treat yourself. It's going to be literally based off of how you've been sitting, how you've been walking for the past decade, on top of your limb lengths and your own central nervous system. So I can't tell you exactly what's going to be great for you. It's going to take a lot of experimentation, but I will have a general consensus of what's best for what ailment later on. Just give me some time. I don't think I really explained the thought process, but you should be doing this entire stretch routine 3 to 5 times a week. And then those treble exercises you should be doing almost every day, if not 2 to 3 times a day. That's going to lead to the best results. Like I said before, once we get into like the hip positions, like the real awkward positions you really don't want to do in public, that's when you want to really focus on the taint, because that's what's going to really help loosen your pelvic floor if you have those issues. So I'm going to wrap it up here.